Дорогі друзі, дуже радіємо, що ми повернулися на подвір'я, на нашу велику головну сцену. Уже кличемо всіх, хто навколо, хто повернувся на подвір'я до нас.
Hello, dear friends. We are back to our main stage. Our agenda has been disrupted a little bit, but before we proceed with another important topic, I would like to remind you that our first democracy festival would not be possible but for our partners who supported our idea. This is Robert Bosch Foundation and our friends from the International Reconnaissance Fund. We had time to talk to Grigory Baran. We are happy to have him, the manager of the program Social Capital in the International Reconnaissance Fund. Actually, I would like Grigory to join me at this stage with an introductory speech. Dear friends, colleagues, partners, it is a big honor for me to greet you in Poltava at the Democracy Festival Ganok. I would like to extend my gratitude to Tatiana, to the Tehran Agency, to Index for this event. I represent the Reconnaissance Foundation, which has been around for many years in Ukraine. Ukraine is very much engaged in democracy. I will not be talking about all the priorities of our foundation, but one of them is to preserve sustainable democracy in the country at war. We cannot conduct elections during the war, but there are many other tools that you can and you need to do, like public discussions, such festivals and other gatherings. This is an incredibly important thing to do during the wartime without further delays, because authoritarian regime usually is about putting things on hold, and if we do it, we might not get such an opportunity later. Our program is focused on combating the challenges that emerged during the war. The divisions happening in our society and such platforms help people build this kind of dialogue, hear each other. Today at our festival, a lot is said about our decolonization, national minorities or communities, and about our agency. And here, in order not to take up much of your time, I would like to say that our foundation provides support to the festival, not just today, but we actually envisage that this festival will be touring around the cities of Ukraine. So here I mean that even if later this festival is held in other cities, it still has to remain in this city. So I wish you a great rest of the festival. Thank you so much, Grigory. I just thought that among the programs supported in Poltava is Zavia's workshops for cultural managers. I am really happy to see our students, our graduates in our space. Actually, our training program was born as a result of a one-day workshop, and that is another partner of our festival that offered their support. We are grateful to the Zahalom Coalition for their contribution, and now we will have another important event. Grigory has already mentioned that we have a lot of topics related to decolonization, to reclaiming names and voices. And here, actually, Poltava has some things to say and to reclaim certain public figures. So, as for our heroes that the empire stole from us, we will talk about heroes without heroics. Whom do Gogol, Exter, Malevich, and other figures really belong to in the great debate? I would like to invite Anna Lodygina, a journalist, a researcher, the creator of the Back to the Roots project podcast, and the author of a book about Alexandra Exter, and Kateryna Iakovlenko, a writer, curator, and researcher whose work lies at the intersection of writing, contemporary art curation, war documentation, and many other important topics. Thank you, Tanya, for introducing me, for organizing this important event. You can see that there are many triggers in the title itself. Different last names that we seem to be aware about, but these last names also cause quite a debate around it. Anna Lodygina, my colleague, also does her best to make these people more known, but she also does not shy away from some hard topics. And to start this conversation, I would like to get back to the question why these debates arise, why we care so much about that, and how to solve that issue. Hello everyone. I must say that I can talk a lot about these public figures, but I would like us to imagine, at least for a second, that you wake up in the morning and you remember like literally nothing. You do not remember your name, your parents' names, your hometown, your childhood, the story of your country, and of course you would like to get some responses, and the people around will be telling you your name, what kind of books you liked reading, and you would have to believe it. This is exactly what Russia has been doing for centuries at the highest level possible, and they actually made us forget who we are. You know all these things pretty well. Different regulations suppressing the Ukrainian language issued by the Russian Empire and so on and so forth, just for us to not know our roots. And actually, there were some people who were brought up in that time, like Mykola Gogol, Igor Sikorsky, and many other famous Ukrainians. If it is hard for us to respond to the question who they were, it was also hard for them. They were studying at Russian Empire colleges, gymnasiums. We are talking about the end of 19th century when the rise of industrialization happened, and like Ukrainian language was banned and everything was marked and talked about in the Russian language. And actually those people, they were brought up in that atmosphere. You need to we need to say that we have been living under Russian pressure for a long time because they had their grip on the knowledge of the people. And now that we have started our decolonization, we are searching for answers. For instance, Serge, there will be a documentary about Serge at the end of August, and actually I had to work with archives in Ukraine and in France, and I worked with a declassified case. The police, the French police was investigating this case, and they say that Serge Lefar was born in Kyiv, and actually he and the French people, as he was the central figure in the ballet, they were actually exploring his personality. There is one person who had been exploring him for 30 years. Actually, this person, and even she does not understand who Serge Lefar was, because she did not actually realize that he was not just an immigrant from the Russian Empire, but from the Ukraine. He had to make really hard decisions, choices. He was charged and accused of collaborating with the Nazi regime, but here you need to have a good understanding of his Kyiv background, which was formed when different people, different parties would come to power, and many other things. And the French people do not understand the context behind it, but they have the biography of Serge Lefar, many books and things like that. There is another view on it, American one, which is different. If the French people are still on the fence about whether Serge Lefar was uh, guilty of cooperating with Nazis, then Americans they stated. But you know, actually, there is no indication of Ukrainians in the whole story. So the foreign people, they are using the information produced by Russia. We have not produced anything in our state because we were under much pressure from Russia. Our culture was oppressed. I work in archives. We are implementing different projects, but when we were filming the documentary, we visited the opera, and we were talking about the Lefar with the French people, and we said that we have to rethink his history, his background, that he was born in Kiev, and they actually invited me to a performance in the evening, and they said that we will have a premiere, Onegin, which is a Russian play. And I said, sorry, I will not attend. And they said, sorry, yeah, it was a misunderstanding, kind of. So you have to actually, we should not make Lefar ideal, because that person was constantly searching for their identity, exploring their identity, and contributed to promoting the works of Pushkin and all that. And actually, he was inspired by the author Dostoevsky, and he would say that Kiev is the mother of the Russian cities, but at the same time, the first ballet he staged in the Paris Opera was the ballet on the Dnipro River. He would always recall Kyiv. During his first tour in France, he would support the Ukrainian troop and all that. So he was constantly searching for something new. But when he had cancer and he died, one of his last wishes was for his relatives to write Serge Lefar from Kyiv, and it was like that.
I would not leave this topic of Lefar. Working with archives, the available knowledge, we've got the French biography, we have the American view, the film, which is going to be published very soon. Will it be able to change the views on Lefar? Does it reclaim his person to Ukraine? Of course, working with archive is very personal. So why is it so special for you to reclaim his name? Why is it important for you to start talking about him again and build something around this person, something so powerful that it will be able to change all our views, in which a lot of time had been invested into, like 30 years is a long period of time. First, let's talk about the motivation. I asked myself why I was so curious about these persons. I'm working with a lot of persons who are considered to be Russians in the world. My native town of Novakhovka has been occupied. It was occupied in 2022. And when a person goes through such an experience, maybe I just tried this experience on myself. When you can't get back home, you lose a lot. And this unfairness, when I see how my town is tried to be Russified, and when you live through all that, maybe you perceive these people in a different way too. As for Lefaro, this is a very interesting experience. This is a person who's worth making a long adventure TV series with many episodes, multiple episodes, but we had to fit all his biography and remember about everything about his impact on the ballet and his connection with Ukraine, the Soviet Union, France, World War II. We had to identify which stories will be told. But when we presented the film for the first time in Stockholm in April, why we chose that location? Because Lefar's heritage is disappearing. Like the picture is something which was painted and it can be preserved for hundreds of years, but ballet, like when one generation does not dance, the dance disappears, and that's a huge problem. And there are only 2 of his ballets which are being performed now, and he actually created over 280 ballets. He was also a talented manager. And we don't have this ballet at all. It was shown once 20 years ago, and that's it. In April, in the Royal Opera, one of his most powerful ballets was shown, Suite in White, and we also showed the film so that people could watch the film and the ballet. But apart from the Swedish citizens, there was also the French ambassador to Sweden, the French Institute, and it was interesting for me to observe their reaction. The Ukrainians, after watching the films, lacked the proof that he is of Ukrainian origin. And I started thinking, maybe we did not show him citing Shevchenko or putting on embroidered Ukrainian short or supporting the Ukrainian ensemble, but the French and the Swedish approached me with big eyes because they do know who Serge Lefar is. They were really impressed because our people don't know him, but they do. The major challenge with the film was like the situation when Ukraine could not preserve its statehood during World War II. This was a choice without a choice. We were choosing between 2 tyrannies, the Soviet Union and Germany. For us, it's clear, but for foreigners, it might not be so obvious. And this situation actually explained his behavior, why he did something bad, as they think that these were bad things. But now they understood this choice of his and why Lefar and other persons like Varvara Karinska, she's often remembered as the first Oscar laureate for costumes for Jeanne d'Arc with Inge Bergman. She was almost 40 when she immigrated, but all these people usually presented themselves through local identity, like I'm from Kiev, I'm from Kharkiv, I'm from Odessa, because it was clearer for the foreigners to perceive them this way. Maybe like some people understood what Ukraine is, but for average French people, they understood that there used to be a Russian empire and then it collapsed, but into which countries they didn't have a clear idea, and we can see that in the documents. Now this is changing, and this is important. I would like to ask you a bit a provocative question. Why do we now need any proof that the person considered themselves a Ukrainian? Can can this be in line what was possible then, back then, when the empire existed, taking into account the education and the whole context? Everything was formed and shaped by Moscow, and you couldn't get some of the things the way you wanted. Are there any data allowing us to review their biographies? And why do we always need to have this proof of this simple wording? Problem number one is that a lot of archives are owned by Russia. And finding a person there who would go and scan or take a photo of something, it's almost impossible. It's dangerous to get just one piece of information. It might take you 2 years, for example, and this is the major problem. Another problem is the budget. I want to go to Paris and search Alexandra Exter's archive. I need to find money for that. Some institutions provide money, but not as much as this is done in other countries. Like the budget, the French budget for 1 year for studying Lefar's biography. So this was enough for her to live for the whole year. I myself invest my own money into my research. I'll give you an example. Ilya Repin, another person I have been dealing with. He was born in Chuguyev, this is Kharkiv region, the Sloboda, Ukraine. Before studying at the Academy of Arts, he used to live there, and this is one of the central imperial artists. We'll know that he was painting Stolypin, the emperor himself, and at the same time he has very bright pictures dedicated to Ukraine. But we don't know much about that, apart from his most famous work, which he considered to be the most valuable. That's the Zaporozhians writing a letter to the Turkish Sultan. He celebrated his 70th anniversary, and he wanted to get back to Chuguyev and build the Academy of Arts there. When he was studying himself, let me remind you that Russia had the monopoly for all the knowledge. All institutions, educational establishments were Russian. So to become an artist, you either had to travel west, like Warsaw, or go into St. Petersburg. So this is where he, along with other artists, went. He wanted to build the Academy of Art in Chuguyev. He collected money for that. This was his life dream. And then World War I starts, the October Revolution, and he had a mansion in Finland, not far from St. Petersburg. And this is where he lived. He did not accept the ideas of Bolsheviks and revolution. And when Finland declared independence, his mansion remains on the Finnish territory. During the rest of his life, he stayed in Finland, and some of the works by him are preserved in the Finnish Museum. Then World War II comes. We know that Russia occupies this Finnish town. Repin's children stayed in that mansion. They did not want to live in the Soviet Union. They moved deeper into the Finnish territory. So they took the most important thing and they left the rest and moved outside. So what Russia did, they changed the name of the town into Repina. They made the museum out of this mansion and called it the Museum of the famous Russian artist. They collect his arts. This is the UNESCO monument now, and that's it. So they put it like it. So they produce this knowledge that Rapin is a famous Russian artist. They make joint art exhibitions with the Helsinki Museum, which also owns Rapin's work. So they make this collaboration, the exhibition by Rapin's paintings. Like for the Finnish museum, this is marvelous because they only have 10 paintings of his, and now they have the opportunity to show the whole exhibition, like hundreds of paintings. And then suddenly, as Oksana Zabushka said, the military forces of Ukraine gave us the possibility of this reattribution, because otherwise this would have been impossible. The Finnish museum, due to the local activists, due to our Ukrainian diaspora, Ukrainian embassy in Finland, I was also involved in that. We have been communicating with them for years, and finally we managed to make sure that Repin is recognized as the Ukrainian painting. This has been a very long communication. I was sending them copies of metric books, but they could have got the copies of these metrics books even before, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So this was a very hard work. This week, Repin had his birthday. There was not a single event. There was no discussion. There was no event. And then we have a question. We want him so much to be a Ukrainian artist, and we don't celebrate it. There are different sides of his biography, and one thing is something that we communicate to the whole world, and the other thing is what we are discussing within inner circles. So when you want to read something about Repin, where can you get this information? There is none. When I travel abroad and read lectures to foreigners, well, they get so enthusiastic, but where can we read about that? But you can't read it even in Ukrainian. Now, luckily, some books appear, but there must be much more of them, and we can't finally understand the reality in which these people were living. That's why it's so difficult to tell their identity. There is this notion of double identity, but we have to make as many hypotheses as possible. And now let's get back to you.
It's a question for me. There has to be like a pantheon. Who has to be part of it? Taking into consideration these identities, who has to be part of that again? It's an incredibly important question. In fact, people talk a lot about literature, but it happened that it's not the case about art. It is caused by a very few number of museums, and this canon is usually formed by museums, the institutions exploring different collections of various artists. You mentioned Repin, but for instance, another important point is that the picture, the Cossacks are writing the letter to the Turkish Sultan, features his friend. And this painting was designed to promote Ukraine culture. Actually, this gets the artists back to the Ukrainian art pantheon. And you know, what did Repin see in Chuguyev? The same as Alexander Gnoleitsky from the same city. He's one of the most famous, renowned artists of late 90s, early 2000s. Actually, that city gave birth to famous people, and you know, people were contemplating the same things. They were growing up in the same time, in the same city, had similar impulses, and probably this canon is like the same. It brings together different artists. They rethink local or ancient culture, and here I would like to talk about Alexandra Exter. This is an artist who had a good understanding of what was happening in Europe back then, but she was really inspired by artists, amateur artists, and she actually brought that kind of tradition into her own art. She didn't steal it, she didn't try to copy, she just emulated that kind of pattern. Actually, she had a national exhibition in the National Museum of all the local artists, and that was one of the curator's exhibitions. She did it intentionally by adding her concept, her vision. I have no doubts about whether Alexandra Exter is a Ukrainian artist, because actually she initiated a new movement, art movement, and no one else has this kind of history. She lived abroad, worked abroad a lot, but her activities were completely different in Ukraine, and actually she treated Ukraine differently. Maybe her age played a vital role, financial status, you know, being a refugee, having a status is really hard for a person. But you know, when we are talking about rethinking and reframing, we are not talking about all of this just for no reason. There is a reason. There are many famous artists that go back to different art periods, to their teachers who were featuring Soviet social realism, but it seems to me that what Ilya Repin has created was also something different. Actually, there is some general information about the key artistic figure in Ukraine, but actually one art museum in Kyiv is not sufficient either. We need to have different institutions. We have to develop this kind of facilities. We have to explore archives more. But actually, as I have already mentioned, we can work with this in different ways, even through art. But yes, indeed, we should never forget that we do need it and remind ourselves that all these people matter a lot as they are the foundation of our visual tradition. Thank you so much. I thought that we had another 5 minutes ago, but still, I will just summarize and say that we should never idealize these people. You know, we have to study their biographies, explore them, and even accept different unpleasant things as part of our history. Thank you so much, dear friends, for your attention.